So let's start with the heart or cardiovascular problems. And these can be summarized up really into groups of problems which are often involve a lot of medication with the patients. And a lot of these medications can interact. I had a patient this week who was diagnosed with liver disorder function, and she produced 7 medications that she was on, 7 different medications. And some of them were more familiar sort of antidepressants, and some were water pills. And you know, once they start on one, they then end up with a side effect, which is not really a side effect, it's an effect of the drug, of course, because it suppresses other biochemical pathways. Then they end up on another medication and so on. And of the 7, one was an anti-inflammatory, a non-steroid anti-inflammatory, and the other was paracetamol. And when I tested them, the one that showed up was actually the paracetamol. All the other medications were tolerant, but the paracetamol was the one that wasn't. And I said, you know, are they making any difference? She said, no, they don't make any difference to the pain at all. I said, well, why do you take the paracetamol? She said, well, you know, I was told to do it. And I said, well, if you're taking out non-steroid anti-inflammatory, do you need the paracetamol in addition? And it seems that both of them weren't really making any difference, and they weren't getting to the cause of what the pain was due to. So it can be just one isolated medication, and that can cause all sorts of problems, including many of these. And the first one that so many people seem to be on is blood pressure pills, isn't it? They've only got to go up, you know, 130 over 80, and they're considered to be hypertension virtually. And it's the same on statin drugs for cholesterol. You know, the goalposts have been moved so much back that their aim, I think, is to get most of the population when they hit 50 onto medication. So hypertension is a very common problem, and it's quite normal, of course, when we're exercising for the blood pressure to go up, and when we're not exercising it should go down to a resting level. And the resting level of blood pressure really, when I qualified, was considered to be 100 on the top plus your age, was the standard as far as getting a life assurance policy. So if you're 50, then 150 was acceptable. Okay? 155 maybe not. 145 would be okay. Nowadays it's got down to 120 or 130. So it's just a matter of moving the goalposts. So blood pressure is something which occurs as far as the flow is the difference in pressure against the resistance of the artery. So what we know is that the arteries are like hose pipes, and what happens with the hose pipe when you send water down is the hose pipe is going to dilate a little bit, and then you get a spurt out the other end. And in between the beats of the heart is like the tap being turned on and off. So it's possible that the tap is flowing too fast, in other words the heart is beating too fast, or the hose pipe doesn't dilate to the pressure, and this is usually due to hardening of the arteries. So if the arteries have become less elastic, obviously the pressure is going to increase inside the hose pipe. And the control of both the heart rate and the arteries is neurological. So there is a hormonal connection here, like adrenaline when we're under stress, but the major control is due to neurotransmitters and brain chemicals operating the width of the arteries. And these, of course, are our friends like noradrenaline of the sympathetic nervous system, which is there to increase blood in certain areas when we're under stress and to dilate in the others. So at times of like shock, we can get vasoconstriction in one area and vasodilation in another, all in the same day. So every single neurotransmitter, as we'll see, can be involved with regulating blood pressure. So histamine, for instance, increases fluid retention in the body, and therefore up goes the blood pressure. Okay, noradrenaline. Acetylcholine, on the other hand, operates the parasympathetic nervous system, which generally relaxes blood vessels to keep the blood pressure lower. Excitatory neurotransmitters like glutamate and aspartate can hit the heart, pacemakers, and set the heart off going very, very fast. And so every neurotransmitter has can have an effect on blood pressure. So when we come to look at neurotransmitters by looking at the beginning and ending points of the meridians, we can almost predict whether the person's got high blood pressure or not. So the most important thing with a person who comes in with blood pressure is not finding the medication, it's finding the cause, what it is that's out of balance. So high blood pressure is just the result of a problem, like all these things are, of something out of balance. Now, the second most common thing that we come across, or with patients complain of, or tell us of, is that they've got high cholesterol and maybe high triglycerides, and are then put onto medication to lower this, and most of those are put onto statin drugs. Now, what most people don't realize is that cholesterol is very, very important for the cell membranes. So it gives the turgidity or the stiffness to our cell membranes. If we didn't have cholesterol in our cell membranes, we'd be like an amoeba. Every cell would be just all fluidy, made of fatty acids. So we need cholesterol. It's very, very important. And the bad boy is not cholesterol, as we'll see. It's oxidized cholesterol. In other words, when that cholesterol becomes oxidized or hit by free radicals, reactive oxygen species, that's when the danger is that we can get hardening of our arteries. Nothing wrong with cholesterol itself. Now, the other major purpose of cholesterol in the body, in the circulation, is to make steroid hormones. So by lowering down cholesterol artificially and blocking its production, you end up often with a low level of circulating cholesterol to make our steroid hormones in our adrenal cortex and our gonads. And so we begin to shut down our adrenals, and then we get more stress as a result of the effect of that. So what cholesterol isn't eaten, and 2/3 of cholesterol is actually manufactured in the body. So by restricting your input of so-called animal fats into the diet and eggs and things like that, actually doesn't lower blood cholesterol at all. Only in very, very high, extremely high cholesterol levels does dietary intervention have an effect. On a normal sort of, or more commonly increased level of cholesterol, changing the diet makes very little effect at all, because 2/3 is manufactured inside, and it's manufactured from a substance called acetyl-CoA. That's the substrate for making cholesterol. Now, we make acetyl-CoA in every single cell in our body from glucose, and this is the familiar energy pathway. So when we make energy, or ATP, we make it from the fuel of glucose. So glucose, as we'll see, has to get across the cell membrane barrier, which is another hurdle because that's taken and controlled by insulin. And inside the cytoplasm of the cell, it forms pyruvate, or pyruvic acid. It crosses the mitochondrial membranes then to form acetyl-CoA, which is the substrate for the Krebs cycle. And the Krebs cycle is, or citric acid cycle, is there to produce protons. And the final part of the making of energy is called the electron transport, which occurs in between the mitochondrial membranes, where we make most of our energy. So 32 molecules of ATP are made here, whereas only 6 are made here. So this is more what we call anaerobic, doesn't require oxygen, whereas this part does require oxygen. Now, acetyl-CoA is, the acetyl part is a very important substance because it goes on to make acetylcholine, which is what regulates our parasympathetic nervous system. And CoA is the active coenzyme of vitamin B5. So vitamin B5 is important here in the process of producing energy. Now, the speed, as I've talked to you before, of the rotation of the Krebs cycle, in other words, the metabolic rate of a person, is dependent upon thyroid hormones. So on the day-to-day basis, it depends upon T3. So T4 is not so biologically active in the mitochondria. T4 we primarily make in the thyroid gland itself. And this is then transported to the cells, taken up in by the cells, and converted inside the mitochondria to T3, which is the activated form. And the level of T3 is what spins the Krebs cycle. So if we have too much thyroid hormone, then we get a fast metabolic rate and people lose weight. And if the metabolic rate goes slower, we produce less T3, T4, and then our metabolic rate goes slower and we gain weight. Okay, it's as simple as that, really.